Alrighty, so this is going to be the first video for the 3.2 lesson. We are going to talk about factoring. So whenever I have two terms, as a reminder, I have two terms. They are both perfect squares, and we are subtracting this. This is in the form a squared minus b squared. This can always factor into a minus b and a plus b. Because they're both perfect squares and we're subtracting, we're going to square root. We're going to square root both terms, write them separately, put one with a minus, one with a plus. So over here, 4 and y squared are both perfect squares. When we square root, we get 2y. 49 is a perfect square. It's 7. So we're going to write two parentheses with a 2y and a 7. One is a minus, one is a plus. Kind of like what we've always done with our factoring. This is also a perfect square. Notice we have sine squared theta. 1 is also a perfect square. Just because it's sine squared doesn't mean it's not a perfect square. So we're going to factor this. So we get sine theta and a 1. And we get sine theta and a 1. We get a minus and a plus, or a plus and a minus, and we have factored. When we have a quadratic and it's in the form with an x squared, an x, and a b, this is kind of what we call standard form. We have ax squared plus bx plus c. I know what you're thinking. These are minuses and these are pluses. Well, what they mean, a minus and a plus in a formula means either change the sign if it's a minus, don't change the sign if it's a plus. So what we are going to do is we're going to take our number in front, a, and we're going to multiply it by c. And I'm going to ask myself, what two numbers multiply to give me the product ac? And when I add those two values together, we get a b. That's what we're going to do. And when I give you three terms and it's a quadratic, this is how it gets factored. So we're going to take the number in front, 1. I'm going to do 1 times negative 6, and I'm making a negative 6. 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. Then I'm going to ask myself, what two numbers add together and not only multiply to give me negative 6, but add to give me negative 1. And I'm going to go through the list. What numbers multiply to give me negative 6? 1 and 6, 2 and 3. And that's pretty much it. And so I'm thinking that's going to be 2 and a negative 3, because 2 times negative 3, that's negative 6. And 2 plus negative 3, that's negative 1. So when I write my answer, I am going to say x plus 2 and x minus 3. It has now been factored. Factoring is unmultiplying. If I multiply x plus 2 and x minus 3, I'm going to get x squared minus x minus 6. Factoring, unmultiplying. Just because we're throwing in our sign terms, it doesn't matter. You can look at this as saying x squared plus 3x minus 40. The sine squared x is going to act as my x squared, sine x acts as my x, and then we're going to minus 40. So we're going to ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 40, and the same two numbers add to give me a positive 3. Now you may have factored these differently, and that's okay. This is just the way I like to do it. You can continue to factor it your way. So 8 times negative 5, that gives me negative 40. 8 plus negative 5, that gives me positive 3. So when I factor this, I'm not going to say x, we're going to say sine x. So sine x plus 8. Sine x minus 5. That term that expression has now been factored. It's been unmultiplied. Same idea, except now I have a number in front. So I'm actually going to do 2 times negative 12, a times c. 2 times negative 12 gives me negative 24. So I'm going to ask myself, what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 24? That when I add those same numbers together, it gives me a positive 5, my b value. So how about again? Oops, did I just? Yeah, that one's 8 and 5. This one is though going to be 8 and negative 3. I had to look back at that last one because I was like, wait a minute, didn't we just do one like this? We sort of did, but not quite. So the values we're going to say is x plus 8 and x minus 3. Now there's a little difference between this one and the last one. The number in front is no longer 1. It's a 2. So what we're going to do to compensate for that 2 is divide both of these terms by 2. If they divide, divide it. If they don't divide, take the denominator and move it in front of the x term. This method is called the bottoms-up method. Like I said, you may have used a different method. You're welcome to still use it. This is just the method I prefer. We're still doing the signs. Signs are just like the x's. So I'm going to take a times c. 2 times 1 gives me 2. And I need those two values to add together to give me this b value, which is 3. So that's going to be a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2. So this is going to factor into sine x plus 1, sine x plus 2. Divide both of the numbers by a. If they reduce, reduce it. If they don't reduce, bring the number up in front, bottoms up. That's now been factored or unmultiplied. Now these are cubes. Now the rules for cubes, whether it's a plus or a minus, are going to be very, very, very similar. So if I give you a cubed plus b cubed, we're going to write this as a plus b. I'm going to cube root both of the terms, and whatever this sign is, it goes right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do first times first, a times a. That gives me a squared. And then I'm going to do a times b, change the sign. And then b times b, which gives me positive b squared. Boom. If it was a negative instead of a positive, it would be very much the same. Cube root them both. It's negative now because of a negative. The cube root of negative b cubed is negative b. And then I'm going to do first times first, a squared. First times second, change the sign. Always change the sign when I do first times second. And then negative b times negative b is positive b squared. Well, I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to cube root both x and 27 because the cube root, what times itself 3 times, gives me 27, 3. Now I'm going to do first times first, x times x, that's x squared. X times 3, change the sign, and positive 3 times positive 3 is positive 9. That's now been factored or unmultiplied. So when we see each other next class period, what I'd like to do is I'm going to start off with factoring this one. So if you have any other questions on the factoring, please let me know because I really want to help and we really got to be able to factor. We're going to do this one in class.